The First Contact. The year was 2099, and humanity was on the brink of something no one could have ever imagined. Earth had become a peaceful place, at least for those who had the luxury of forgetting about the struggles of the past. Technology had advanced far beyond what most people had dreamed of, and the wars of old had faded into history. Life on Earth had become simple, predictable, and quiet. People went about their daily routines, oblivious to the fact that their world was about to change forever. It began with a rumble in the sky. At first, it was nothing more than a strange buzzing sound, faint and distant, like a swarm of bees in the air. People thought it was some new form of weather, or maybe even a sound from a nearby rocket launch. But then the rumbling grew louder, and the sky itself seemed to crack open. Bright lights flashed above major cities, and the air felt thick with electricity. In a matter of minutes, everything changed. Thousands of dark, enormous ships appeared in the sky. They were unlike anything anyone had ever seen. They didn't look like conventional spacecraft. No, these ships were massive, their designs jagged and sharp, like some terrifying creature of steel and fire. They hovered above Earth with a slow, calculated precision, as if they had all the time in the world. It wasn't long before the first broadcast came through. The world's most advanced communication systems suddenly began to buzz, crackle, and flicker. News stations everywhere went dark for a moment, and then a cold, mechanical voice filled the airwaves. "We are the Galactic Empire. We have arrived. Surrender your planet and your species, and we may spare your lives." The voice was deep, booming, and filled with an authority that made it clear that this was no joke. No one knew where it came from or how the aliens could communicate with them so perfectly in their own language. But there was no time to question it. Panic spread across the globe like wildfire. Governments scrambled to react. The President of the United States, along with leaders of other nations, rushed to emergency meetings. Military forces went on high alert, and scientists tried to make sense of what was happening. But despite all the preparation, no one knew how to deal with this new, unimaginable threat. Earth had never seen anything like it. In the midst of the chaos, a massive alien ship descended into the heart of New York City, its shadow covering entire streets. The people below watched in horror as the ship's metallic doors slowly opened. A figure stepped forward, tall and imposing, draped in dark armor. It was humanoid in shape, but its features were alien. Its skin pale, almost translucent, its eyes glowing with an eerie red light. It raised a hand, and the crowd below fell silent, as though they were compelled by some unknown force. "We are the Empire," the figure said, speaking in perfect English. "Bow before us, and we may allow you to live. Resist, and you will be wiped from existence." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Humanity's first true contact with an alien race was not a peaceful meeting but an overwhelming declaration of war. The figure stepped back into the ship, and the massive doors closed with a metallic thud. The sky above darkened as more ships filled the sky, and the reality of the situation began to sink in. Earth wasn't just facing an alien invasion. It was facing the might of a galactic empire, one that could destroy them with a single command. The world held its breath. The next few hours were filled with confusion. Some people believed it was all a hoax, a mass prank being played on the entire planet. But the air was thick with the strange energy of the ships above, and military satellites picked up signals from the invaders, signals that confirmed the worst. This wasn't a joke. Earth was under attack, and the Empire was real. In Washington, the president called for an emergency broadcast. As he stood in front of the cameras, his face pale and serious, he spoke to the world. "We don't know who these invaders are or where they come from, but we do know one thing. We will not give up our planet without a fight. I call on every nation to unite. We will defend Earth with everything we have." But the president's words, meant to inspire courage, were quickly overshadowed by a chilling message from the Empire. The same voice that had spoken before now echoed through every communication channel. Your attempts at resistance are futile. We have the power to destroy your cities, your armies, your very way of life. Surrender now, and your people may live. Fight us, and you will be erased." The message was clear. There would be no negotiation, no mercy. And so, humanity was faced with a choice: surrender to the unknown, to the terrifying alien empire, or stand and fight. A fight against an enemy that had already shown its terrifying power. For most, surrender seemed like the only logical choice. But there were whispers in the shadows, in the underground bases, where a small group of brave men and women refused to give up. They knew that surrender meant the end of Earth, the end of everything they had ever known. They couldn't let that happen. A rebellion began to form in secret. But for now, the world could only watch as the alien ships loomed in the sky, waiting for humanity to make its choice. What would Earth do? Would they fight, or would they bend the knee? The countdown to humanity's fate had begun. The rebel movement. In the days that followed the first contact, Earth's cities fell into a kind of uneasy paralysis. The alien ships remained in orbit, their looming presence a constant reminder of humanity's helplessness. The governments, despite their best efforts, had no idea how to combat the Empire's overwhelming technology. Military strategies were devised, but each one ended in failure. The weapons of Earth, fighter jets, missiles, and even nuclear warheads, were no match for the alien force. But while the world's leaders scrambled to negotiate and surrender, not everyone was ready to give up. Deep within the shadows, a resistance was beginning to take shape. It wasn't a large force at first, just a handful of individuals who had once fought on Earth's front lines, now united by a single purpose: survival. In a small, nondescript building hidden beneath the streets of New York City, a former military commander named Alex Raynor stood before a group of rebels. Their faces were grim, their eyes sharp, and their resolve stronger than ever. Alex wasn't the leader they wanted. He was the leader they needed. A man who had seen battle firsthand and understood that hope was the only thing more dangerous than an enemy. "We're not going to win this war by waiting for a miracle," Alex said, his voice steady as he paced in front of the table. "We can't rely on our governments, and we certainly can't trust the Empire's word. We're going to fight back. And if we're lucky, we might just turn the tide." His words were met with a mix of skepticism and fierce determination. These people were survivors, veterans of Earth's wars, scientists who had studied alien technologies, and civilians who had lost everything in the initial wave of destruction. Together, they formed the backbone of the resistance. Their goal wasn't just to survive. They aimed to break free from the Empire's grip and reclaim their planet. But they were under no illusions about the task ahead of them. The Empire was powerful, its technology far beyond anything humanity had ever seen. Their ships could obliterate entire cities in a single blast, and their warriors were nearly indestructible. There was no conventional army on Earth that could match them. "We need allies," said Dr. Lena Dorian, a scientist who had once worked on advanced energy weapons before the invasion. She was one of the few who understood the Empire's technology well enough to recognize its weaknesses. There are hidden resistance groups across the globe. People who have been preparing for this moment long before we knew the Empire existed. We need to find them and unite. Alex nodded. He knew this was the only chance they had. Agreed. The more we can recruit, the stronger our chances. But we can't afford to move recklessly. The Empire's spies are everywhere. They have eyes in every corner of the world. As Alex spoke, he couldn't help but feel a twinge of doubt. He had led troops before, but this wasn't a conventional war. The enemy they were up against was not just advanced, it was vast. Their fleets stretched across the stars, and the Empire's reach seemed limitless. Could humanity really stand against them? But there was something else, something that kept Alex going. An ember of defiance that refused to die. Earth was his home. His family had fought for its survival before, and now it was his turn. He would not let his planet fall without a fight. Across the globe, The situation was bleak. While the governments of the major world powers still clung to the hope of diplomatic talks, people in smaller cities and rural areas were left to fend for themselves. The alien ships had begun to land in key locations, paralyzing regions with their advanced technology and striking terror into the hearts of civilians. In Africa, a group of former warlords had banded together, forming an alliance with underground resistance forces. In Europe, remnants of the military had regrouped, hiding in the mountains of Switzerland, planning covert operations. Yet, despite the courage and resourcefulness of these small factions, humanity remained divided and scattered. The Empire had a way of knowing where to strike, and the brutality of their initial attacks was swift and without mercy. Earth was a fractured world, and this made organizing resistance difficult. The key to winning, Alex knew, would be to find a way to unite humanity. The first mission came faster than expected. Alex's team had tracked a small group of rebels in South America, those who had taken refuge in the Andes Mountains after the initial strike. Their leader, a former fighter pilot named Hector Ruiz, had a reputation for being a fierce leader and a tactician. If anyone could help unite the scattered factions, it was him. Alex, along with Dr. Linadorian, and a handful of experienced fighters, boarded an old military transport plane. The flight was tense. The air was thick with anxiety as they crossed the jungle and climbed higher into the mountains. The rebels' location was a secret, and they would have to rely on a series of encrypted messages and signals to find them. One mistake, one misplaced transmission, and the Empire's forces could be on their tail. The plane flew low over the mountains, the engines humming through the still, thin air. Below, the dense jungle sprawled endlessly, with only the occasional clearing to break up the endless sea of green. They had to be careful. The Empire had begun monitoring communications, and any sign of resistance would trigger an immediate response. After what felt like hours of tense silence, they finally spotted a signal, a small remote airstrip hidden in the mountains. The plane descended, and Alex's heart raced. They were close. As the group disembarked, they were greeted by a group of well-armed rebels, their faces a mixture of determination and weariness. At the front of the group stood Hector Ruiz, a tall, weathered man with short-cropped hair and piercing eyes. He looked like someone who had seen too many battles, someone who had lost too much but kept fighting anyway. Hector walked up to Alex, offering a firm handshake. "You've come a long way. You must be serious if you're willing to risk this kind of journey." Alex met his gaze. "We're not here to waste time. We need your help to fight back against the Empire." Hector didn't speak for a moment. He studied Alex, then glanced at the other rebels behind him. "I've heard rumors about what's been happening on Earth, but rumors don't win wars. We need more than just stories. We need weapons, we need information, and most of all, we need a plan." Dr. Linadorian stepped forward. "We have information. We've uncovered some of the Empire's weaknesses, but we need more. We need the best minds and the strongest fighters. The Empire's forces are overwhelming. Alone, we can't win. But together, we might stand a chance." Hector nodded slowly, then turned to the others. "We've been waiting for someone like you. We've heard of other groups scattered across the world. It's time we unite them, form a real resistance." And so, the first steps toward a united Earth were taken. It wouldn't be easy, and there would be countless obstacles ahead. But for the first time since the invasion, Alex and the resistance had a glimmer of hope. And hope, as they knew, was the most dangerous weapon of all. The Galactic Empire's secret. It had only been days since Alex Rayner and his team had successfully united with Hector Ruiz and the South American resistance, but the weight of their success was tempered by the knowledge that they were still outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of time. Earth's fragmented rebel factions were beginning to consolidate, but they lacked the resources to challenge the full might of the Galactic Empire. The harsh reality hung over them, all like a dark cloud. Despite their newfound alliances, Alex knew the true battle wasn't about winning individual skirmishes. It was about understanding the enemy, the Empire's motives, its strengths, and most importantly, their weaknesses. There had to be something, some secret hidden deep within the Empire's strategy that could turn the tide of this war. In the days following their meeting with Hector's rebels, Dr. Lena Dorian pored over everything they had managed to steal from the Empire's communications and ships, scraps of data, intercepted transmissions, and a few scattered pieces of alien technology. They had learned a few things about the Empire's capabilities, but there was still so much that remained a mystery. What exactly was the Empire's end goal? Why Earth? Why now? What did they want from humanity beyond submission? Lena worked late into the nights, surrounded by monitors, alien blueprints, and cryptic codes. She was exhausted, but she couldn't afford to rest. As she examined the decrypted files, a small piece of information caught her attention, something buried deep within a military log transmission, a reference to a prime directive, which at first glance seemed like just another standard order. But something about it didn't sit right. Lena dug deeper. Meanwhile, Alex and Hector were in a different kind of war room, an old underground bunker deep in the heart of the Andes, surrounded by high-tech monitors and maps. It wasn't much, but it was functional. The rebel leaders gathered around, discussing their next moves. They had set up a few secret operations to harass the Empire's patrols, but nothing substantial. The reality was that they were still too weak to confront the full might of the Empire. How are we supposed to fight an enemy that can wipe out entire cities in a heartbeat? Hector asked, frustration clear in his voice. We've tried everything, and every time, we're met with overwhelming force. At this rate, it's just a matter of time before they destroy us all. Alex stared at the map, his mind racing. Hector was right. They couldn't afford to play defense anymore. But what were they going to do? They had no idea what kind of power the Empire truly held, and every plan they had tried so far had ended in failure. But then Lena's voice cut through his thoughts. She stepped into the room, her face pale and drawn, but her eyes burning with excitement. I think I've found something, she said, her voice trembling slightly with the weight of her discovery. What? Alex asked, standing up quickly. It's not just about Earth, she said, pulling up a holographic projection of an ancient alien schematic. The Empire has been consuming planets for millennia, but they've never encountered something like Earth before. There's something here they didn't expect, and I think I've figured out why. Lena explained as she pulled up more files, linking pieces of the puzzle together. The Empire's ships were powered by an unknown energy source, something far more powerful than any human-made fuel. It had been theorized that the Empire tapped into a form of energy that existed at the subatomic level, a dark force that allowed them to manipulate space itself. But there was more. The Prime Directive. It's not just a military order. It's a code that the Empire follows for every planet they conquer. They're not here to enslave us, not entirely. They're here to consume the planet, to strip it of its resources, and drain it dry. Lena paused, watching as the realization hit Alex. What the Empire is really after is our planet's core. Alex narrowed his eyes, leaning closer. Our core. Yes, Lena said, her voice a mixture of fear and wonder. The Empire's ships have been equipped with a device capable of harvesting and channeling an energy source unlike anything we've ever encountered. They have the technology to drain a planet's core of its power, leaving it hollow, a lifeless shell. The energy they extract is what fuels their Empire's endless expansion. That's why they've come here. Alex felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard whispers of such things, but to hear Lena confirm it in such stark terms was beyond anything he had imagined. The Empire wasn't just trying to conquer Earth. They were after its very heart, its lifeblood. If they succeeded in draining the core, Earth would become nothing more than a dead rock, floating in space. But why Earth? Hector asked, his voice low with disbelief. Why us? Why now? Lena's eyes locked onto his. Because Earth's core is unique. It's a rare kind of energy source, something that the Empire's empire-wide resources have been desperately searching for. A planet with a core this rich in untapped power has been a long-term goal for them. How do you know all this? Alex asked, still trying to process the implications. I found old research, Lena continued, from when the first humans attempted to harness energy from the Earth's core centuries ago. The ancient texts are vague, but there were signs, stories about a mysterious force deep within the planet, something that could bend space and time. The Empire has been tracking these anomalies for centuries, and now they've finally pinpointed Earth. Alex's mind raced. So it's not just about conquering us. They need to destroy us to take what's inside our planet. Exactly, Lena replied. They won't stop until they've stripped Earth of everything it has to offer. Back in the Resistance's hidden base, the gravity of the situation began to settle in. What they had initially thought was an invasion for conquest was actually a mission of annihilation. The Empire wasn't just here to take over. They were here to reduce Earth to nothing. Alex knew that they couldn't just fight the Empire on the battlefield. If they were going to have a chance at survival, they needed to stop the Empire from getting to the core. The problem was, no one knew how to access it. The core was buried deep beneath the surface, and the Empire had already started constructing massive drills, huge, colossal machines designed to burrow down through the Earth's crust and tap into its energy. The clock was ticking. The Empire was already beginning their excavation, and Alex knew that if they didn't stop them soon, Earth would be nothing more than an empty husk. We need to find the core, Alex said, his voice firm. We need to figure out how to stop them before it's too late. Dr. Lena Dorian's eyes narrowed. The core is heavily protected. Even if we find it, we don't have the means to stop them. There's always a way, Alex replied, determination in his voice. We'll find the weak point. There has to be one. As the team began to strategize, one thing was clear. This was no longer just about fighting the Empire. It was about saving the very planet they called home. Alex felt the weight of the task ahead of him. If they failed, Earth would be gone forever. And with it, humanity's last hope. The battle for Earth had become a race against time, and the Empire was winning. The battle begins. The tension in the underground base was palpable. Alex Rayner stood before the war table, eyes scanning the map that detailed the Empire's movements over the past week. It was worse than anyone had feared. The Empire's fleet, still hovering in Earth's orbit, was growing, with new ships appearing almost daily. They had begun setting up large, sophisticated mining rigs around the globe, drilling deep into the Earth's crust in search of the core. Despite the valiant efforts of the Resistance, the Empire was methodical and relentless, their military presence more overwhelming by the hour. Earth's forces, no matter how unified or well-intentioned, could do little more than harass the invaders. Every time they launched a counteroffensive, it felt like they were swatting at a hornet's nest, only to have the swarm come back stronger. We don't have the luxury of time anymore, Alex muttered, slamming his fist on the table. The Empire is already too entrenched. They'll have the core's power within weeks if we don't act now. Lena Dorian, who had been buried in the data all night, looked up from her screen. You're right. They're using a type of drill, something far beyond our tech, capable of reaching the mantle in a matter of days. It's not just about the core anymore. They're taking control of Earth's very foundation. Alex clenched his jaw. And once they take it, Earth becomes a dead planet. A deep silence fell over the room. The threat was too real. The Empire's cold efficiency and the sheer scale of their resources meant that they could continue mining Earth indefinitely, while humanity's attempts at resistance would always be caught in a constant cycle of destruction. What's our plan, then? Hector Ruiz asked, his voice steady. We've tried guerrilla strikes, sabotage, everything. We're always a step behind. How do we fight an enemy that's already this far in? Alex stared at the map. He knew Hector was right. Small raids, even sabotage, were barely enough to slow down the Empire's progress. What they needed was a decisive strike, something that would make the Empire rethink its entire operation. But where? How? Then it hit him. "There's one thing we can do that they'll never expect," Alex said, his voice low with realization. "We strike at their heart." Lena's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "We hit their main command ship, their flagship. If we can cripple their control, disrupt their communication network, and maybe take out some of their power infrastructure, we can set them back, force them to rethink their whole strategy. They won't be able to coordinate their forces, and it'll give us the opening we need to make a real assault." Hector stepped forward. "That's insane. Their flagship is the size of a city. It's practically indestructible." "Not if we can get inside," Alex replied. "We don't need to destroy it outright. We need to disrupt their systems, take down their leadership, create confusion, and throw their entire invasion plan into chaos. If we can do that, we'll buy ourselves some time." There was a murmur of uncertainty around the table. The idea of infiltrating the flagship seemed like a suicide mission. They would be outnumbered, outgunned, and up against an alien technology they barely understood. But Alex's voice cut through the hesitation. "We don't have a choice. We have to act now. If we wait any longer, they'll finish what they started, and Earth will be lost." The plan was set into motion faster than anyone expected. Alex's team, along with a small, hand-picked group of elite fighters from the Resistance, began preparations for the most dangerous mission humanity had ever attempted. Their target, the Empire's flagship, hovering in orbit just above the Atlantic Ocean. The flagship, the Dominion, was a behemoth, a floating fortress of metal and fire. It was designed to intimidate and to dominate. Its surface was lined with weapons that could level entire cities, its interior packed with the Empire's most skilled officers and soldiers. Every human in the galaxy had heard of the Dominion. It was a symbol of the Empire's power, the heart of its military might. But Alex wasn't daunted by the size of the ship. He had a plan. A small strike team would board the Dominion in a specially modified stealth shuttle. Their goal wasn't to engage in open battle. They would infiltrate, sabotage, and create chaos. Lena had been working with the best engineers in the Resistance to design the shuttle, a hybrid of human and alien technology that could bypass some of the Empire's most sophisticated detection systems. It wasn't perfect, but it was their best shot. The shuttle would be small and fast, relying on stealth and speed to avoid detection as it made its way to the Dominion's outer docking bay. Once aboard, the team would split into two groups. One would plant explosives in the key power systems, while the other would target the command center. The goal was to cripple the Empire's ability to coordinate, and if they were lucky, eliminate a few key officers in the process. But there was no certainty. Infiltrating a ship the size of the Dominion would be nearly impossible, and the consequences of failure were catastrophic. But Alex had no other choice. They had to act. The assault. As the shuttle slipped through the atmosphere and entered the fringes of the Dominion's defensive perimeter, Alex's heart pounded. They were flying blind, relying on Lena's calculations and a handful of well-placed distractions to cover their approach. The ship loomed ahead, its metallic surface reflecting the stars in eerie silence. The Dominion was an impressive sight from a distance, but up close, it was more intimidating than Alex had imagined. Massive docking ports lined the ship's surface, filled with the hustle of Empire workers preparing supplies and troops for deployment. "You ready?" Lena asked, her voice tight over the comms. "As ready as we'll ever be," Alex replied, trying to steady his breathing. They flew silently through the outskirts of the ship, dodging the occasional scanning pulse from Empire patrols. The shuttle's stealth capabilities kept them undetected for now, but time was running out. The closer they got, the more dangerous it became. A single misstep, and they'd be torn apart by the Empire's defenses. Approaching the docking bay, Lena called out, "Get ready." As the shuttle neared the bay, Alex's team readied themselves. They knew the mission was far from guaranteed, but they also knew that if they didn't succeed, humanity's last hope would be extinguished. The shuttle entered the bay, and the moment they touched down, the team was on their feet. Alex led the charge, securing the area outside the shuttle, checking for signs of patrols. The rest of the team followed suit, quickly getting into position as they moved towards the interior of the ship. They didn't have much time. As they navigated through the cold, sterile corridors, their mission became more and more urgent. The oppressive silence of the Dominion hung in the air, broken only by the soft hum of its engines and the occasional clanging of distant doors. The first resistance came quicker than expected. As Alex and his team moved deeper into the ship, they encountered a small squad of Empire soldiers. The firefight was quick and brutal. Despite their superior technology, the rebels had the advantage of surprise, and the Empire soldiers were outmatched by the rebels' speed and guerrilla tactics. But the cost was already beginning to show. Every second they fought, every blast they fired, brought them closer to detection. And soon, Alex knew, the entire ship would be on high alert. They pressed forward, pushing into the heart of the flagship, determined to reach the power grid and the command center. The countdown. Time was running out. They had planted the explosives and sabotaged the systems they could, but the Empire was catching on. Patrols grew more frequent, and alarms began blaring across the ship's vast network. Alex and his team had reached the command center, their final target. The door was heavily guarded, but they had expected that. A battle ensued, intense and fast-paced, but as the last of the guards fell, Alex finally breached the door. Inside, the command center was a hive of activity. Empire officers shouting orders, technicians scrambling to make sense of the mounting chaos. But when Alex entered, everything stopped. The officers froze, their eyes locking onto the ragged group of rebels who had infiltrated their command center. With a steady hand, Alex raised his weapon. This ends now. And with that, the real battle began. The heart of the Dominion. The explosion was deafening. The carefully placed charges detonated just as Alex and his team had planned. The sudden, violent shockwave rocked the corridors of the Dominion, sending a ripple of chaos throughout the flagship. Sparks flew from damaged panels as lights flickered, plunging sections of the ship into darkness. The crew in the command center scrambled in a frenzy, but it was too late. The Empire's delicate control was already beginning to unravel. But the damage was only beginning. Alex could feel the weight of what they had just set into motion. The sabotage had worked, but their time was quickly running out. The alarms blared, louder now, echoing through the metal halls. The entire ship was on high alert. They had to move fast, or they would be overwhelmed by reinforcements. Move! Alex shouted, pushing through the door to the command center. His pulse raced. He could hear the frantic voices of the officers scrambling to restore order. This was the heart of the Empire's operation on Earth. If they could tear apart this nerve center, the rest of the invasion would fall into chaos. Lena and the rest of the team stormed into the room, weapons raised. The officers froze, their faces pale as they realized they were facing a handful of human rebels, not an entire army. But their shock quickly turned to defiance. "Get them!" One of the officers barked, and in an instant, the room exploded into action. Alex dove to the side, narrowly avoiding a blast of energy that shot past his ear. He returned fire, the powerful shots from his weapon cutting through the air with precision. The officers scrambled for cover, returning fire with weapons that hummed with an unnatural energy. The room was a blur of movement, alien technology against human resolve. The resistance team worked as one, relying on the combat training and tactics that had gotten them this far. They'd fought like shadows, moving quickly and decisively. In the chaos, Alex could barely hear Lena's voice over the comms, directing the team to key targets, disabling the power grid and communications network. But the officers were relentless. One of them, a tall alien with dark green skin and sharp, angular features, began barking orders, coordinating the defense. Alex recognized him immediately. He was a high-ranking officer, someone who likely had a hand in the Empire's invasion of Earth. The alien officer glared at Alex, a cold, calculating look in his eyes. "You are foolish," the officer sneered, speaking in a voice that echoed with a chilling authority. "You think this will change anything? The Empire is eternal. You can't stop us." Alex met the officer's gaze. "We're not here to stop you," he said, his voice steady. "We're here to make you fear us." The words hung in the air like a challenge, and in that moment, Alex knew there was no turning back. The fate of Earth, the fate of humanity itself, rested on what happened in this room. The fight for control, the battle in the command center raged on, but it was clear that they couldn't hold out forever. The officers' forces were well-trained, and though the rebels were gaining ground, they were still severely outnumbered. Every second counted. "Lena, how's it going with the system?" Alex called out as he took down another officer, his weapon's energy bolt scorching through the air. "I'm almost there." Lena responded, her voice strained but determined. "Just give me a few more seconds." Alex nodded, gritting his teeth. He had no choice but to keep the pressure on. He moved toward the central control panel, dodging incoming fire and weaving through the debris scattered across the room. His team had already taken out several key officers, but there were still more to go. The collapse of the Dominion. The countdown echoed in Alex's mind, each second drawing them closer to their final escape. The Dominion was slowly beginning to come apart. Power systems were offline, shields were compromised, and the central command grid was in disarray. The team had done their part. They had severed the nerve center of the Empire's flagship, but the escape would be the most dangerous part of the mission. They had no time to waste. The lower decks of the Dominion were chaotic. Rebels and Empire soldiers alike were scrambling through the corridors, trying to regroup after the sudden sabotage. The alert klaxons were deafening now, warning the crew of the impending disaster. A subtle, almost imperceptible tremor ran through the ship as the damaged reactors began to overload. They had planted enough charges to make sure the Dominion would never leave Earth orbit. It would be nothing more than a broken shell of metal and fire, drifting in space. But it wouldn't just fall apart immediately. The Empire would fight to the bitter end, and the longer they stayed aboard, the more likely they were to get caught. "Time's almost up," Hector called over the comms. His voice was tight, a mix of anticipation and dread. "We need to move faster." "We're not going anywhere unless we keep moving," Alex answered, checking his weapon. They had no choice. They had to get off the ship before it collapsed completely, but they also had to avoid running directly into the Empire's reinforcement waves. The team moved in a formation. Alex in the lead, Hector covering the rear. Lena was at his side, clutching a device that would trigger the final charges. The rest of the rebels were strung out behind them, a tightly knit unit of soldiers and technicians. Their mission had been a success, but the escape was another battle in itself. The lower levels of the ship, once cold and sterile, now felt more like a maze of confusion. The Dominion was large, too large to search efficiently, but Alex didn't need to search for a way out. He knew they had to head toward the rear, where the shuttle bay was located. If they could get back to the shuttle, they could make their escape, using the chaos to cover their flight from the ship. "We're nearing the docking bay," Lena said, her voice strained but focused. "We'll need to cut through a few more security corridors. The Empire's reinforced those areas. Then we'll make our own path," Alex replied, a faint smile playing on his lips. The mission had already been a gamble. They had nothing left to lose. The last stand. As they moved through the ship, the atmosphere grew thicker. The Empire had realized what was happening, and resistance was becoming more organized. By the time Alex and his team reached the shuttle bay, they were met with heavy opposition. The stormtrooper-like soldiers were everywhere, alert, ready, and well-armed. Alex glanced at Lena, who nodded, her fingers already at work on a small device she had carried with her. It was a jammer, designed to scramble the Empire's communications and disable any nearby tracking systems. The problem was, it would only work for a short time. Once they activated the jammer, the Empire would be able to pinpoint their location within minutes. "We're out of time," Lena whispered, activating the device. The small screen on her wrist flickered and blinked. "I know," Alex said, grimly, "but we've come this far. We're not letting them take this from us." The shuttle bay doors were just ahead, but before they could reach it, the sound of boots thundered down the corridor, and Alex's worst fear materialized. A squad of Empire shock troopers appeared at the junction, massive, heavily armored soldiers, each one carrying a plasma cannon that could vaporize anything in its path. The resistance was outnumbered. "Hold them off," Alex shouted. "I'll get the shuttle ready." "Not without us," Hector replied, his tone fierce. "We're all in this." The fight erupted in an instant. The Empire soldiers opened fire immediately, their cannons whirring as bolts of searing energy tore through the hallway. Alex ducked behind a column as a blast narrowly missed him, singing the edge of his jacket. He aimed his rifle and fired, taking down one of the soldiers with a precise shot to the chest. The other rebels weren't far behind, their weapons sparking as they returned fire. Lena and Hector formed a defensive line, cutting down any soldier that tried to advance, but they couldn't hold them off forever. The Empire's troops were relentless, pushing forward in waves, determined to stop them at all costs. "We can't keep this up," one of the rebels yelled, his voice strained with exhaustion. "We don't need to," Alex shouted back, his eyes scanning the bay doors. They were almost there. With a final burst of adrenaline, Alex and the rest of the team fought their way toward the shuttle, cutting down any soldiers who stood in their way. The shock troopers were formidable, but the rebels had a strength that the Empire couldn't match: the will to survive, the determination to fight for their home. Finally, they reached the shuttle. Alex didn't wait for anyone else. He jumped into the cockpit, slamming his hands onto the controls. The shuttle's engines roared to life, the bay doors opening just as another wave of Empire soldiers rounded the corner. The shuttle shot forward, narrowly avoiding the incoming fire. "Hold on," Alex called over the comms, his heart racing. He didn't have time to waste. The Dominion was falling apart behind them, and they had to escape before the flagship's massive gravity well pulled them back in. But the battle was far from over. The chase through the ruins. As Alex and the team pushed the shuttle through the burning remnants of the Dominion, he could feel the ship's tremors growing more violent. The Empire's flagship was dying, but it wasn't going down without a fight. "We're not out of the woods yet," Lena said, glancing at the radar. "They've launched pursuit ships. A lot of them." Alex cursed under his breath. He had known this was coming, but there was little time to make any escape plans. The shuttle was fast, but it was no match for the Empire's smaller, more agile starfighters. He couldn't outrun them forever. "Get us out of here," Hector shouted, his hand gripping the seat in front of him. "I'm trying," Alex replied, gritting his teeth. He punched in a few controls, pulling the shuttle into a hard turn as a barrage of enemy fire rained down on them. The shuttle rocked as it narrowly avoided the plasma blasts, but Alex pushed the engines harder, aiming for the edge of the Dominion's blast radius. "You won't escape," a voice suddenly crackled over the comms, cold and unmistakable. It was the same officer Alex had encountered in the command center. "The Empire is eternal. You're only delaying the inevitable." "Not if we can help it," Alex shot back, his fingers dancing across the controls. The Dominion was breaking apart behind them, but the pursuit ships were gaining. They needed a way to shake them off. "Hold on," Lena shouted. A burst of fire from one of the Empire's starfighters hit the shuttle's tail, sending the craft into a spin. For a moment, everything seemed to slow down. Alex fought with the controls, trying to regain control of the ship. His heart pounded in his chest as the shuttle tumbled through space, spiraling toward a debris field. But then, in a moment of clarity, Alex spotted something. An opportunity. "The debris field," he said through clenched teeth. "If we can get through it, we can lose them." "Are you crazy?" Hector shouted, looking over at him. "We'll crash. We crash if we don't try." Alex shot back, pulling the shuttle hard toward the field of debris. As the shuttle careened toward the floating wreckage, the Empire's ships followed, thinking they had cornered them. But Alex knew better. The debris field was full of obstacles: wrecked ships, fragments of broken space stations, twisted chunks of metal that could hide their movements. The Empire ships wouldn't be able to navigate it as easily. With precise maneuvers, Alex darted through the debris, weaving between massive wrecks and spinning fragments. The shuttle rocked violently as plasma fire ripped past them, but Alex's skill and focus kept them alive. Every move was calculated. He had done this 1,000 times in simulations, but this was real. They were fighting for survival. Behind them, the Empire's ships were slowing down, caught in the maze of debris. They couldn't keep up. As they broke through the field and entered open space, Alex let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "We're clear," Lena said, a small smile on her face. "Not yet," Alex replied, staring out at the wreckage of the Dominion. The flagship was beginning to fall apart, the massive energy core at its center beginning to collapse in on itself. The Empire had lost, but the battle wasn't over. Not for Earth, not for humanity. Alex turned to face his team, his voice steady and resolute. "We've won this round. But there's still much to do. The Empire will be back. We have to be ready." And with that, the Dominion began to burn, its final destruction marking the beginning of a new era, a new fight, for humanity's future. The aftermath and a new dawn. The stars outside the shuttle's windows seemed to stretch endlessly. For a moment, it felt like time had stopped. The team was quiet, catching their breath, their bodies still tense from the chaos they'd just survived. The Dominion was a smoldering wreck now, its massive frame tumbling through space, a dark reminder of the Empire's failed attempt to crush humanity. But there was no time to rest. The Empire wouldn't give up so easily, and the war, though one battle had been won, was far from over. Alex gripped the controls, staring into the abyss of space as his thoughts churned. They had succeeded, but at what cost? The Dominion was gone, but there were still other ships, other fleets. The Empire had vast resources, and they wouldn't simply allow a human resistance to upend their plans. No, the fight was just beginning. How much longer until we're out of their radar range? Lena's voice was a welcome sound, breaking the silence. "Not long," Alex replied, eyes flicking to the radar. The Empire's pursuit ships were still within range, but they weren't able to track them properly. The shuttle's cloaking systems, designed by Lena and the tech team, were working their magic. It wouldn't be long before the Empire gave up the chase. "Then let's make sure we're not here when they do," Hector said, his voice laced with a quiet urgency. He turned his gaze to Alex. "Where to next?" Alex took a deep breath. "We need to get to Earth. We've shaken them off for now, but the Dominion was just the tip of the iceberg. They won't stop. We have to build a real defense. We need to rally every nation, every resistance cell. The war isn't just on Earth anymore. It's in the stars. Earth's last stand. A planet united." The shuttle flew through space at full speed, the hum of its engines the only sound in the cabin. The team, though weary, was resolute. Alex glanced over at Lena, who was busy scanning the incoming data from the ship's systems. Hector was in the back, checking their weapons and ensuring they had everything they needed for the next phase. Despite their exhaustion, there was a sense of focus in the air. Their victory aboard the Dominion had been a triumph, but it was only one part of a much larger war. "Coordinates locked in," Lena said, looking up from the control panel. "We're heading back to Earth. I've pinged the global network. Once we arrive, we can get in touch with the rest of the resistance. It's time to unite." Alex nodded, his eyes narrowing. "We don't have the luxury of time. The Empire will regroup, and next time, they'll come stronger. We need to organize quickly. Every country, every colony, every resource." "You're right," Lena said. She adjusted the shuttle's trajectory. "We have a limited window before the Empire sends reinforcements. We need to take control of Earth's defense network, and we need to make sure no one else gets captured by the Empire. We have to show them that humanity isn't something to be conquered," Hector added, his eyes gleaming with a fire that hadn't dulled. "We're not just fighting for survival anymore. We're fighting for everything we've built. Our future." The shuttle slipped into Earth's atmosphere, breaking through the clouds as they approached their landing zone. The cities below were just beginning to stir. The world was still reeling from the first wave of the Empire's invasion. People were scared, uncertain, but that was about to change. Alex stood, moving toward the comm station. "Lena, patch me into the global resistance channels." "I'm on it." Lena worked her fingers over the console. Within seconds, Alex was connected to a network of leaders from around the world. Fighters, diplomats, and strategists. The resistance was scattered, but it was growing. The faces on the holographic display were a mix of expressions: hope, fear, determination. They were ready for whatever Alex had to say. "This is Captain Alex Kepler," he began, his voice steady, yet carrying the weight of the moment. "We've just destroyed the Dominion, the Empire's flagship, and the spearhead of their invasion. The Empire underestimated us. They thought we were weak, but we've shown them that humanity has a fire they can't extinguish. This is our planet, and we won't go down without a fight." A murmur of approval rippled through the group, but Alex raised a hand. "This victory isn't enough. The Empire is still out there, and they'll come again, stronger and more prepared. We have to unite every nation, every resistance faction. We need to bring the fight to them, but we can't do this alone. We need to form a global alliance, militaries, civilians, scientists, everyone. This is Earth's last stand." There was a moment of silence, but it didn't last long. "We're with you, Captain," a voice from the screen said. It was General Ramirez, leader of the South American resistance forces. "The Empire won't stop until they've crushed us all. But you've shown us that it's possible to win." "We'll rally our people," said another leader, a woman from the European resistance. "We've seen what humans can do when we work together. The Empire won't take our planet." Across the world, nations began to unite in a way that hadn't been seen before. For too long, they had fought their own battles, focused on their own borders, their own concerns. But now, with the Empire knocking at their door, they knew they had no choice but to come together. Humanity had to unite or face extinction. The first steps toward rebellion. The next few days were a blur of activity. Resistance cells sprang into action, communicating, planning, and organizing on a global scale. Alex's team became the heart of the rebellion, their victory over the Dominion inspiring millions. What was once scattered and fragmented now felt like a unified force. Lena and the engineers were working tirelessly to hack into Earth's defense network, disabling the Empire's tracking systems and surveillance grids. They were laying the groundwork for a global counteroffensive. Every resistance leader, every military commander, and every strategist worked as one. But there were still challenges. The Empire had far more advanced technology than anything Earth had, and their ships, weapons, and tactics were beyond what Alex and his team could have anticipated. But one thing the Empire didn't understand was humanity's adaptability. The resistance had learned quickly from their victories and failures. They knew how to turn the Empire's strengths against them. A new kind of war. The first attack on a secondary Empire fleet took place 2 weeks after the destruction of the Dominion. The fleet, a smaller group of cruisers and warships, had been on its way to Earth to reinforce the invasion. But the resistance was waiting. The battle was fierce, a true test of the global alliance's strength. Earth's forces, led by Alex and his team, had managed to intercept the fleet before it could reach orbit. The fight was not just in space. It was on the ground, in the air, and in cyberspace. The Resistance had learned how to strike hard and fast, attacking Empire installations from every angle. In space, Alex led a small strike team in an assault on one of the Empire's cruisers. They used guerrilla tactics, relying on speed, surprise, and resourcefulness. The Empire wasn't prepared for such unpredictable warfare. On the ground, Resistance forces raided key Empire bases, sabotaging supply lines and dismantling their weapons systems. Lena's technological expertise allowed them to turn the Empire's own tech against them, disrupting their communications and crippling their advanced weapons. And in cyberspace, Earth's best hackers launched a series of devastating digital attacks on the Empire's command network, throwing their entire operation into disarray. The battle lasted for days, but by the end, the Empire had lost more than half of its fleet, and Earth's forces had gained critical ground. The message was clear: humanity was no longer a helpless victim. They were a force to be reckoned with. The Empire strikes back. But the Empire was not one to be easily deterred. Their retaliation was swift and brutal. They sent reinforcements, large, heavily fortified fleets and ground troops. They attacked with the full force of their technology, their weapons more powerful than ever. But the Resistance was ready. They had learned from every fight. They had the element of surprise, the power of unity, and the relentless will to fight for their future. "Let them come," Alex said, standing with his team on the battlefield, watching as the Empire's ships loomed on the horizon. "We've just begun."